To this day, my parents are always like, what do you do? We always say different things. We don't really know. So it's very common. So the best way I like to explain it is that American Studies, you don't have to choose. You get to be in an interdisciplinary field where you study American history, life, and culture. And so that can be so many different topics, which is why my parents are always like, what do you do again? So you get to choose, do I want to have history a part of my interdisciplinary study? Do I want political science, sociology, food studies? Some people even do sports studies, but it always comes back to the question of how does this inquiry help us understand more about what does it mean to be American? What do Americans do? What do we like? What's our culture? And that can have an endless array of academic freedom for a student, which is what I love about American Studies. So I was already interested in American Studies here because I did American Studies in undergrad. But then another thing that made me really interested in coming here was that year they were experimenting with bringing a cohort of people who either had the same identity or had the same interest in research. And so my year was a critical Black Studies cohort, which is kind of very rare to have an incoming class that's all African American from all over the diaspora. But just seeing that they were intentional with trying to figure out how do we have graduate students have support networks, whether there is that cohort every year or just thinking about how do we make sure we have well-rounded support for our students so the retention is well. You notice sometimes there's trends that, people are recruiting different people of color or folks from marginalized identities, but then when we get to the school, sometimes the support systems are not there, right? And so I just appreciated that there was a little bit more intentionality. They can't solve everything, but I appreciated just that extra push to think about the humanness of the researchers that are coming into the program. I think it's important because we think we know what it means to be an American, but sometimes the stories that we continue to tell to understand ourselves are kind of the same stories of the same identities, the same demographics, the same locations. And so American Studies opens us up to think about what stories have we not told yet? Or what stories should we see in a different perspective? So a great story that I like to say is that I was studying an institution, I'm not gonna say what it is for the surprise effect, and it was about the workers that used to work there. And we found out that there was some workers that were kind of forgotten about at that institution. There was reference of them in the archive, but family stories were saying, I think my grandmother worked here or my father worked here, but the institution in public memory, Americans did not know. And it ended up being African Americans working at NASA. And later on down the line, this becomes a movie called Hidden Figures, I believe. And now we have that in the public memory, right? That African American woman worked there. Before we had computers, they were the computers. But at that time, people didn't know that. So we know NASA and we know it's rigorous to work there and we know that it would be super cool to work there, right? And smart people work there, but we didn't know African Americans work there. And so that's the type of work that American Studies does, is that we know about NASA. We know that it would be great to work at NASA. It's a part of our public history and our public imagination, right? But we didn't know that until the movie came out. And what happened before the movie? Research. And some of that research was done in American Studies.